This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. Welcome to another episode of Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast. Originally, my blog, Eat, Explore, Love, and this podcast were created to keep relatives of mine up to date on the travels I had while I lived in Italy. Notice that I'm saying lived in the past tense. If you listen back to my Glasgow episode, you'll notice that I mentioned it was a tumultuous 2 weeks in the time that I was there. During those 2 weeks, I feel comfortable enough to share with you that I was unfortunately laid off from my job. My citizenship process in Italy was not complete yet. There's still a lot going on in that particular sector, and that's a podcast for when that journey is over that I'm happy to share about getting a dual citizenship and things to look out for and tips and tricks of the trade and such. Unfortunately, I had to change course. I had to pack up my Italian apartment and I had to move back to the United States. Now I had to sit and think. I still have journeys to share. I am taking my severance and I am using that severance to pay for a grand trip around Europe before I go back to the United States. It's great because it means more stories, more blog posts, and more podcasts, more content in general to share with everybody. It also meant I needed to regroup on what this was going to be used for, Eat, Explore, Love, because what was originally intended as a way of keeping relatives in touch with everything that I had going on, it wasn't going to be that anymore. So I decided to make this as much of a resource as possible for folks that have celiac and want to be able to travel and to know places where they could feel safe eating or places to avoid. It could be used as a resource for people that want to go and travel, some recommendations, some things that someone already tried out for them. And should they bother wasting their time paying for certain tours, or are there other tours that are a little bit more cost effective if you're traveling on a budget? And the lessons learned along the way, to be honest, that portion, those posts, that section of the podcast episodes, that's really been for me. It's been a way for me to keep record of my time traveling, for me to reflect back on and see how much I've grown as a person. There's a lot more I can share on that, of what even brought me to move to Italy in the first place. There's a lot of why I enjoy traveling alone and why I needed this time, but that's a podcast for another time. So I'm regrouping. I am setting some things up, some special interviews up for this podcast to be as much of a resource for others as possible and to learn as much from my experiences as possible in whatever way helps them. With all of that said, I am still figuring out, to my family members, where if they're getting news from this podcast, I'm still figuring out what my next steps are. But what I do know is I have gathered information from all the travels I have done ever. And I've created blog posts that are scheduled and coming out. I have so much content between the present day travels and the travels of the past that people can go and experience and learn from. It's going to last me through at least the end of this year. So, this first initial podcast is the first time we're going to the past. This trip was done just before COVID. My sister was studying abroad in Florence. She also has celiac, and I'm hoping to have her on the podcast on a later date. And I made sure I went to go visit her. This was in February 2020 when COVID-19 was just something that was happening in China, and it was just starting to percolate in Italy. So let's really go back in time. It was something that it was just like the flu, but affected your lungs maybe. That was all that I knew about it. And I came back from that trip and the world had changed. But anyway, to talk about the trip, I went to go visit my sister in Florence, Italy. And my sister and I are not exactly your typical sister relationship. We love each other and we love to spend time with each other, but we definitely need it in doses. And that trip, I think we learned how to function with one another in the best formula and how to travel with each other and where we can enjoy each other's company. And it's where I learned it's okay to do some things alone. So this is before I became totally pro traveling by yourself. I was still figuring all that out. I didn't want to have that be my story. And Florence is where I learned that that had to be my story. So without further ado, I'm going to get to the episode. Enjoy Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast, Florence edition. Now, because I was in Florence prior to the pandemic, a lot of restaurants that my sister and I went to where they were 100% gluten-free establishments are no longer operational, unfortunately. But I'm giving you two places that you can still go and check out. And one is La Giostra, and the other is a chain restaurant called Mr. Pizza. They have gluten-free options there. La Giostra, I would recommend making a reservation ahead of time. They gave us free appetizers, and my sister's a little bit more picky than I am, and I tried every single one. It was an incredible experience. I really liked it, so much so that on my big quote unquote layoff trip of this year, I'm making sure to do a special trip to Florence for my birthday, and I'm doing my birthday meal at La Giostra. And hopefully, at that Florence episode later on down the line, I'll be able to give more current updates on options that people that have celiac can go and check out. So, to back up even further on my experience, visiting my sister in Florence, it was not the first time I had ever been to Florence. I studied abroad in college for 1 month, and I was based in the city of Rome. And we did a weekend trip as a class together where we did one day in Venice, one day in Florence, another day, and I don't remember what city we went to. We only had one day in Florence. And I didn't really love it. Really, the city that had my heart was Rome. But my sister being in Florence, she showed me a perspective on the city that really had my heart set on Florence. And when I was deciding to go and move to Italy, I wanted to move to Florence, but I was advised that that wasn't the best option. And I ended up living in Verona, but neither here nor there. I cannot recommend that people go and check out Florence enough. I was able to climb to the top of the Duomo. There is a cost for that, and I recommend maybe doing a skip the line version of it, but I highly recommend you go and trying it out. You go up to the top of the Duomo and you feel on top of the world. We also booked through Get Your Guide a motorcycle tour, and I nerded out so much. My sister sat on the back of the motorcycle, and I got to sit in the sidecar. It was kind of like what you see in 101 Dalmatians, the cartoon where the Dalmatian is sitting in that sidecar and on the motorcycle. That I was the Dalmatian. It was so much fun. My sister and I were laughing the entire time. I've never gotten to ride a motorcycle before, and I felt really, like, in my nerdy way, really cool. I got to have that experience. It was also February 2020, remember? So it was still relatively cold in Florence, and the guy that was driving the motorcycle said, "Are you guys sure you want to do this? It's really cold out." And we did, and we had so much fun. We loved our tour guide, and I can't recommend it enough that you do the motorcycle tour. There's also so many museums. It's kind of like New York, where you have so many options and places that you can go to. I got to see the Statue of David. I got to go see a bunch of museums that my sister recommended that unfortunately I don't have the names for, but I definitely recommend that you take advantage of those museums if you can. Now, I know that this is a brief episode on what to do in Florence and what to eat, but never fear. I will have another episode about Florence later on down the line when I go and visit during my birthday. Now, this trip was the perfect balance of being able to visit and spend time with my sister, but also learning how to enjoy having time to myself. I'm definitely an introvert, which surprises a lot of people because I did theater and performed on stage and can hold my own in a crowded room. But I'm an introvert in that I prefer to recharge by being alone. I also got to relearn a city in the most magical way and appreciate it way more. And I'm very appreciative of my sister for showing me the beauty of Florence because based on my first experience, I wouldn't have necessarily felt the need to go back. And now Florence is a city that I can visit over and over and over again. And I'm going to go visit it again. But back to the point of the lesson for the week of learning that balance. And I struggle now very much in traveling with other people. And I think there has to be, for me now, when I'm traveling with others, I need to designate some time where I am by myself. So, for instance, my sister would be in class. It forced me to have to go and wander the city by myself. And then we would do an activity together a day. So we had our time apart and we had our time together. I'm also going on a cruise and I'm making sure that there are times where I am with the person I'm going on the cruise with, and there are times where I'm taking some time to myself because I know that that's how I'm going to be the best version of myself, where I'm not going to get snippy and take out my anxieties or how overwhelmed I might be by being with people out on the person that's kind enough to travel with me. I'm still figuring out because I don't really get to do enough of both, of traveling alone and with others. But that seems to be my formula for success, of making sure I have designated time alone. It's also why I like traveling with my friend Sarah. You've heard her in previous podcast episodes where she and I will do our things together. And then I do my best to give her space, and she does the same for me. So that way we're able to recharge by being alone. So I definitely recommend, if you're going to travel with others, know yourself and trust your gut and respect your own boundaries. Now, you have to travel a bit to be able to understand what your boundaries are, and that's okay. It's a learning process. But if you know you're an introvert and you're traveling with others, it's not up for other people to navigate their life around you. It is your job to set up a space where you feel the most comfortable. So, for instance, my sister and I also did a celiac cruise together, a podcast episode to come out about that eventually. With all of that, there has to be an understanding and a respect for, I know that she's also an introvert, and she, more so than me, is very introverted and recharges by being alone. She needed to stay in the room and not have anything to do with anybody if she wasn't doing an activity. So what I could do and what I can control, even though I needed to recharge by being alone, I grabbed a book. I picked a quiet spot on the boat to go be with myself and where no one was going to find me. And I was going to read that book and be by myself for a little while. And when I was ready, I would go with other people. Now you have to make sure that if you're doing that and if you're removing yourself from a group situation at any point in time, you need to be respectful and that there are safety concerns, and keep in touch with people. So if there was something happening on the boat, or if my sister and I, were in Florence and I was out doing something, I kept in touch with her so she knew I was safe. But other than that, or if there was an activity happening that I thought she might like, I let her know. But other than that, kept communication to a minimal. And again, it's not just something that I do with my sister, but something I do with my friend Sarah, with other people I travel with. It's about setting the boundaries and saying, okay, I'm filling up my cup now of what I can handle. I need to go and spend some time by myself. So just again, knowing your boundaries. Other people, it's not their job to understand, and quite frankly, who cares if they understand your boundaries? You need to do what is best for you and what's going to make the trip as successful as possible for you and make you sure you look back fondly on that time. So that was a big lesson I learned in my time in Florence. And I'm very thankful of that. And I'm thankful for the opportunity that I got to fall in love with the city. And I'm thankful for the memories I got to create with my sister in Florence. Now is the time for the wrap-up questions. Do I feel the city is safe for those with celiac? Yes. Favorite place to eat? La Giostra. Favorite memory from the experience? The motorcycle tour. Is this a city to vacation to or live in? I think you can do both. Is this a city to relax or to be active? I think it's more of an active city situation. You're doing a lot of walking and there's a lot to see and do. How are the people? Didn't really interact with them enough to know. So that's pretty much my experience in Florence, and I highly recommend that you go visit. I know that we touched on a lot of different topics. If anybody has any questions, or if anybody has their own story they want to share, or any other additional resources that they would like, please feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Till next time. Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on hieatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.